Good morning.
Good morning.
This morning, we invite you into a space of peace and non-judgment. We'll talk today about our first principle, but I want us to be guided by our third and fourth principles. Our third principle, the acceptance of one another and encouragement toward spiritual growth. And our fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We call you to listen with open minds and open hearts. This is a space that allows each of us to question how we live our lives in the safe embrace of our beloved community. There's a mural I came across on Instagram last year that I think about often. It is a larger-than-life painting of a young black woman wearing a t-shirt that reads, "I am my ancestors' wildest dreams." In this somewhat simple but powerful painting, the artist, Brandon B. Mike Odoms, conjures up a clear, long line of history, generation after generation, fighting for liberation. Like any good piece of artwork, it can be pondered deeply, and it can speak across racial and national lines. It makes me reflect on my own ancestors, not just my biological ones, but my spiritual ones as well. We have a rich history of members of our faith who proudly worked for social justice and promoted lives of peace and love. From the abolitionist Unitarian minister Theodore Parker in the late 1850s, who refused to assist with the recovery of enslaved refugee people, to the Reverend Waitstill Sharp and his wife Martha, who helped refugees escape the Holocaust and whose work would eventually lead to the creation of the UUSC, to the Reverend James Reeb, who lost his life because he marched on Selma with MLK Jr., protesting for equality. We can see how these ancestors of ours have inspired each generation to move more deeply into our values, widening our circles of compassion to help us achieve a more peaceful world. Unfortunately, it feels as though the violence and hatred in our world is growing. The rise of white nationalist groups, the increases in mass shootings, and the passing of laws that legally separate parents from their children are all violent and traumatic. I can't help but wonder what ways we can promote more peace and love in this world. And I believe the way in which we interact with animals may hold a key. The Greek mathematician and philosopher Pythagoras believed that as long as we wield our power over other species, we will never live in peace with our own. Transitioning to a vegan lifestyle propelled Jack and I into a life of spirituality. By casting our circle of compassion so wide for it to include the well-being of pigs, chickens, even fish and bugs, I inadvertently awakened my consciousness to the reality of racism and a host of other oppressions that contaminate our society. By becoming vegan, I didn't just deepen my compassion for animals, I deepened my compassion for humans, for all of life. This challenged what I thought I knew as undeniable truth. It questioned traditions that had been incredibly important to me. This was no easy awakening. To open our hearts and examine our roles in the oppression of other lives can bring up feelings of guilt, frustration, and even despair. It can also inspire deep reflection and pondering about how our values look lived out in the real world. It can inspire radical compassion and the desire to treat ourselves, each other, and our planet with more care. The UU minister, Gary Kowalski, has said in his book, The Souls of Animals, "Our kinship with animals is about our kinship with life. It is a step away from loneliness and alienation, and a step toward finding ourselves welcome and well amongst the Earth community. It is about learning to take our place with reverence and respect in the council of all beings." Our first principle states that we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. The First Principle Project is a movement within the UU community to change that wording to the inherent worth and dignity of every being. A changed first principle affirms explicitly and more powerfully what many UUs already hold to be true, that all individuals of any species merit our compassionate consideration, and that because they too are part of the beautiful whole, they have inherent worth and dignity. This sanctuary space is a place free of shame or blame. We are not here to judge, we are here to share. In a spirit of compassion, with the eager joy and inquisitiveness of children seeing the world around us for the very first time, may we worship together this morning.
Our chalice lighting this morning is a quote from Albert Einstein. A human being is a part of a whole, called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our own personal desires and to the affection for a few persons nearest us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circles of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Please join me in saying our unison affirmation printed in your order of service.
Inspired by love, our mission is to seek our true nature